What awaits us if the agreement from the conference is followed, and what if not?
So one of the outcomes of COP27 was the strengthening of pledges made in Paris Agreement, because that was also stressed or understood after Paris that the pledges are not enough. And it was agreed that these pledges will be updated every year since Paris. So the expectation is that basically all of the countries will strengthen their pledges, their mitigation efforts, and to speed up the decarbonization. But it's not really happening. At least it's not happening in many countries. The closest to the decarbonization currently is European Union, and surprisingly, in 2022, also China was reducing emissions, CO2 emissions, quite fast. But it's not given that it will continue in the future or into the future. And this is the condition, right? So we really need to reduce and apply these pledges and strengthening of these pledges into the future every year. Otherwise, we cannot limit warming to the agreed limit. Not certainly 1.5 and probably not even 2 degrees. So currently the current pledges, including this year, will lead, according to the expert analysis and published papers, will lead us to somewhere 2.5 and more global warming, which is still too much for to keep the climate system working for organized society. So clearly we need much more stringent pledges and legislation. If this doesn't happen, if that what was agreed again in not only in COP27 but also in previous, that we will not make the pledges much more stringent, and if we don't follow up on them, then there will be no, then the warming simply will continue. That's the basic physics.
How impacts an energy crisis climate crisis?
This is a little bit related to the question of conflict in Ukraine and related energy crisis. I think that currently one of the outcomes, of course, is rising energy prices, which is energy crisis. And what does it mean? It means that ordinary people are trying to solve substitutes and substitute to cheaper energy. And unfortunately, they don't care so much about what is the source as much as about the price. So if it's cheaper, they will use it. Like, people can burn wood, or they can burn even coal if it's cheaper for them, instead, for instance, gas. Also, it can help to drive people away from gas using some low carbon technologies, if that's available for them, if they have enough resources or money, so it can go both ways, right? So it can help and it can make the problem worse. The thing is that people always decide based on the prices and the actual situation they can deal with, mitigating the high prices related to energy. So that's the core of the whole climate issue, right? So the thing was that the fossil fuels were always the cheapest for us, so that's why we use them, and usually the alternatives were more expensive, and that's why the substitution was, or still is, very, very problematic. The good thing, and this applies even during this energy crisis that is happening, the price of solar energy and wind energy, or generally low carbon energy, is going down very rapidly, right? So the price of alternatives is declining. So it's easier for more people to substitute fossil fuels, the expensive fossil fuels, with relatively cheaper low carbon energy sources. That would be solar and wind. So this is the good thing. It still is not enough to reduce carbon use globally and fast enough, right? So that's why we need all the other things that would help to do it systematically, to do it on the large scale and do it globally. So energy crisis is bad if you don't use it as a chance to get rid of to low carbon energy, and you go for other, high carbon energy sources, like for instance when you substitute gas from Russia, for instance, with gas from US, that is several times worse in terms of carbon footprint. So that is that's the bad option. If you substitute it with low carbon energy and sustainably, and you can do it for a long time, then it's of course the good option.
COP28 will be held in Dubai, which is heavily linked to fossil fuel industries. How is it possible?
I don't know. I think the idea is to include also the fossil fuels rich countries to be part of the solution, right? So we understand that all countries have to be part of the solution. So that is, we have to talk also with the bad guys, let's say, so with the countries which are rich on fossil fuels, who are rich or who are getting rich on fossil fuels, and who will do everything to to slow down the process. But we cannot solve climate change without them. So I think the idea is to make them more willing to cooperate with the others, and to try to convince them that they can be part of the solution. If that works, I don't know, maybe it does for some people, maybe it doesn't for others. Maybe they can use it for greenwashing, like they say, look, we are doing these climate conferences, so we really want to solve the problem, but in reality, they really don't. That may be also the case. But I don't think the main problem is where these conferences are held. It might be wherever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter, I think. The bigger problem is what is being discussed there, what are the outcomes, who is lobbying for what, and it really doesn't matter if it's in Egypt or Qatar or Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia. So yeah, it can be both ways, but I think it's not really the biggest problem. Where is it happening, as much as what is being discussed, why, and what are the outcomes.